The Galactic Combat Academy stood like a gleaming tower against the purple sky of Nexus Prime. Inside its halls, the universe's most promising warriors trained side by side. Zephyrians with their crystal-hard skin practiced alongside insectoid Thrakari, while the massive Gorvak flexed their forearms in preparation for battle. Among them all sat one quiet figure that nobody paid much attention to. Marcus Chen had been at the academy for 3 months now, and most students had already forgotten he existed. While others boasted about their homeworld victories or demonstrated flashy combat techniques, the human simply observed. His classmates assumed he was weak, maybe even a mistake in the admission process. After all, humans were new to the galactic community, and their planet Earth was considered a backwater world with primitive technology. "Today we will demonstrate proper combat stance," announced Instructor Vex, a towering reptilian being whose scales gleamed under the training room lights. His yellow eyes swept across the assembled students. Who would like to show the class? Immediately, several hands shot up. Kralzeth, a Gorvak warrior whose family had conquered 17 star systems, stepped forward with confidence. His massive frame cast shadows across the training mat as he assumed what his people called the mountain stance. Other students nodded approvingly at the textbook form. "Excellent," Vex hissed, his forked tongue flicking out. "Now who believes they can identify weaknesses in this stance?" Again, eager students raised their appendages. They pointed out minor adjustments to foot positioning or suggested different arm angles. Marcus remained silent in the back corner, watching everything with dark eyes that seemed to absorb every detail. "What about you, human?" Vex's attention suddenly focused on Marcus like a spotlight. "Do you see any flaws in Warrior Kralzeth's form?" The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward the quiet human who rarely spoke unless directly questioned. Marcus looked up from his seated position, studied Kralzeth for a long moment, then shook his head slightly. "No, sir. The stance appears solid," Marcus replied in his soft voice. Several students snickered. Of course, the primitive human couldn't see what trained warriors could observe. Kralzeth's chest swelled with pride, his forearms flexing as he held the position. "Very well," Vex continued. "Now we will practice counterattacks. I need a volunteer to attempt breaking through Warrior Kralzeth's defense." This time, fewer hands rose. The Gorvak were known throughout the galaxy for their incredible strength and endurance. Kralzeth's family military record spoke of crushing enemies with bare hands and surviving direct energy weapon hits. Only the most confident students dared volunteer. "I'll try," said Nexia, a graceful Zephyrian whose crystal skin could deflect most physical attacks. She was among the top fighters in their class. The two warriors faced each other on the training mat. Nexia's crystalline form gleamed as she activated her species' natural armor enhancement. She moved like liquid light, striking at Kralzeth's stance with precision attacks aimed at the weak points other students had identified. For several minutes, they exchanged blows. Nexia's speed against Kralzeth's power created an impressive display of galactic combat techniques. But despite her skill, she couldn't break through his defense. The Gorvak's stance held firm, his forearms working in perfect coordination to block and deflect her attacks. "Enough," Vex called, and both warriors stepped back. As you can see, a properly executed stance can withstand even skilled assault. "Are there any other volunteers?" The room remained quiet. If Nexia couldn't break through, who could? Some students began discussing the demonstration in low voices, analyzing techniques and suggesting improvements. "What about our silent observer?" Vex's voice cut through the chatter. Once again, all attention focused on Marcus. "Human, would you like to attempt what your classmate could not accomplish?" The suggestion was almost insulting. Marcus was smaller than most students in the class, had never demonstrated any combat abilities, and came from a species that most galactic citizens considered barely evolved beyond primitive warfare. Several students openly laughed at the idea. "That's hardly fair to Kralzeth," called out Thorax, a Thrakari whose insectoid features clicked with amusement. "The human has no combat training. It would be like asking a cargo drone to fight a battleship." More laughter rippled through the class. Even Kralzeth's mandibles spread in what passed for a smile among his people. The idea of losing to a human was so ridiculous it wasn't worth considering. Marcus looked around the room at all the faces watching him with expressions ranging from amusement to pity. He noticed how they positioned themselves, how they moved, how they thought. 3 months of careful observation had taught him more about his classmates than they realized. "I'll try," he said quietly, standing up from his position. The laughter grew louder. Students began placing casual wagers on how quickly the demonstration would end. Most estimated less than 5 seconds. Kralzeth returned to his mountain stance, but his posture was relaxed, almost casual. Why waste energy on a human? Marcus walked slowly to the center of the training mat. He didn't assume any recognizable combat stance. Instead, he simply stood naturally, hands at his sides, looking almost bored. This brought fresh waves of amusement from the audience. "Begin when ready," Instructor Vex announced, though his tone suggested he expected this to be over quickly. For a moment, nothing happened. Marcus studied Kralzeth's stance one more time, his head tilting slightly as if calculating something. The Gorvak warrior waited patiently, confident in his defense. Then Marcus moved. What happened next would be discussed in academy halls for years to come. The human didn't charge forward with brute force or attempt the flashy techniques other students favored. Instead, he simply walked toward Kralzeth at a normal pace, his movements so casual they seemed almost insulting. The Gorvak prepared to block what he assumed would be a clumsy attack. His forearms positioned themselves to catch whatever amateur strike the human might attempt. Every student in the room expected to witness a brief, educational demonstration of why humans didn't belong among galactic warriors. Marcus stepped within striking range and did something completely unexpected. He didn't attack the stance. He didn't try to break through the defense. Instead, he did something so simple, so basic, that it caught everyone off guard. The room erupted in shocked silence as Kralzeth, the undefeated Gorvak warrior, suddenly found himself on the training mat floor, completely unable to move. The mountain stance that had seemed so impregnable moments before was now completely useless. Marcus stood over his fallen opponent, still wearing the same calm expression he'd maintained throughout the entire encounter. He looked down at Kralzeth, then back at the stunned faces of his classmates. The stance was solid, he said quietly, confirming his earlier assessment. But stances are just positions. They don't account for everything. The silence in the training room stretched for what felt like an eternity. Every student stared at the impossible scene before them. Kralzeth, heir to a warrior dynasty that had conquered star systems, lay motionless on the training mat. His 4 massive arms were pinned in a way that made movement impossible, and his expression showed complete bewilderment. Marcus stepped back calmly, offering his hand to help the fallen Gorvak to his feet. The gesture was so casual, so ordinary, that it somehow made what had just happened even more shocking. Kralzeth accepted the assistance, his pride wounded more than his body. How? The word escaped from several students simultaneously. They had all watched the encounter, but none of them understood what they had witnessed. Instructor Vex approached the center of the mat, his reptilian features displaying an emotion rarely seen in the academy. Genuine surprise. In his 3 decades of teaching galactic combat techniques, he had never seen anything quite like this. "Human Marcus," Vex said, his voice carrying a new tone of respect. "Please explain to the class what technique you employed." Marcus looked uncomfortable with the sudden attention. For months he had preferred remaining invisible, observing rather than participating. Now every eye in the room focused on him with intense curiosity. "It wasn't really a technique," Marcus replied, his voice still quiet. "I just noticed something about the way he was standing." "What did you notice?" Pressed Nexia, the Zephyrian warrior who had failed to break through the same defense. Marcus glanced around the room, seeing expectant faces from a dozen different species. He had studied them all during his time at the academy, learning their strengths, their weaknesses, and most importantly, their assumptions. "The mountain stance is designed to resist direct attacks," Marcus explained slowly. "It's built to handle force coming from the front, the sides, even from above. But it assumes the attacker will follow conventional combat protocols." Several students exchanged confused looks. What did that mean? "All our training focuses on honorable combat," continued Marcus. "Strike zones that are considered acceptable, attack patterns that demonstrate skill, defensive positions that show proper form. But those rules exist because we agree to follow them." Kralzeth's mandibles clicked in growing understanding. "You didn't follow the rules." "I didn't break any rules," Marcus corrected gently. "I just didn't limit myself to conventional thinking. The mountain stance protects against attacks, but it doesn't protect against everything." Instructor Vex studied the human with new interest. "Show us again." "Slowly this time." Kralzeth resumed his stance, though with noticeably less confidence than before. Marcus approached just as casually as the first time, but now he moved with deliberate slowness so everyone could observe. See how the stance positions his legs? Marcus pointed out. Perfect for stability and power. His arms create multiple defensive barriers. His center of gravity is low and balanced. Against any normal attack, this is nearly unbeatable. He continued moving closer, and now students could see what they had missed before. Marcus wasn't looking at Kralzeth's defensive positions. He was looking at something else entirely. But the stance requires a stable base, Marcus continued. It assumes the ground beneath will remain constant. With fluid motion, Marcus dropped low and swept his leg in a wide arc. Not at Kralzeth's legs, but at a small piece of equipment that had been left near the edge of the training mat. The object slid across the floor and bumped gently against Kralzeth's foot. The Gorvak warrior instinctively shifted his weight to maintain balance. For just a fraction of a second, his perfect stance was compromised. In that moment, Marcus flowed upward and forward, slipping past the temporarily displaced defensive barriers. What followed was a demonstration of leverage and physics rather than brute force. Marcus used Kralzeth's own momentum and weight against him, guiding the larger warrior's fall rather than forcing it. Within seconds, the Gorvak was again on the mat, his stance utterly defeated. "Remarkable," whispered Thorax, the Thrakari's compound eyes gleaming with newfound respect. "You attacked the environment, not the warrior." Marcus helped Kralzeth up again, his manner still apologetic and gentle. "I'm sorry. I know that probably felt unfair." "Unfair?" Kralzeth's voice boomed with sudden laughter. "Human, that was brilliant. In real combat, there are no rules about fair play. You think like a true warrior, not like an academy student." The mood in the room began to shift. What had started as embarrassment for the fallen warrior was transforming into admiration for unconventional thinking. Students looked at Marcus with new eyes, seeing not a weak human but a tactical mind that operated differently from their own. "This raises interesting questions," said Instructor Vex thoughtfully. "We train for combat, but do we train for thinking? Human Marcus has demonstrated something our curriculum rarely addresses." "What's that?" asked Nexia. "The difference between technique and strategy," Vex replied. "We teach our students to execute perfect techniques within established parameters. But this human showed us that the most perfect technique can be defeated by changing the parameters themselves." Over the following days, word of the incident spread throughout the academy. Students who had never noticed Marcus before suddenly sought him out, asking questions about human combat philosophy. The quiet observer found himself reluctantly thrust into the spotlight, but Marcus discovered that his classmates' interest went beyond simple curiosity. They began asking him to watch their training sessions to point out weaknesses they couldn't see themselves. His perspective, so different from traditional galactic military thinking, revealed flaws and opportunities that conventional analysis missed. "It's like you see the spaces between the techniques," Nexia observed after Marcus had suggested improvements to her crystal armor deployment. "We focus on perfecting our forms, but you see how the forms connect to everything else." Marcus found these conversations fascinating. Each species brought their own assumptions about combat, their own cultural expectations about how fights should proceed. The Zephyrians emphasized grace and precision. The Gorvak valued strength and endurance. The Thrakari relied on speed and coordination. "But what do humans value?" asked Kralzeth during one of their growing friendship conversations. Marcus considered the question carefully. "Adaptation, I think. Humans come from a world where the environment kept changing. We learned to survive not by being the strongest or fastest, but by figuring out new solutions when old ones stopped working." "Is that why you could defeat my stance?" Kralzeth asked. "Because you adapted to it instead of trying to overpower it?" "Maybe," Marcus replied. "Or maybe I just got lucky." But even as he said it, Marcus knew it wasn't luck. During his months of observation, he had studied not just combat techniques but the thinking patterns behind them. He had noticed how each species approached problems, what they considered possible, what they dismissed as impossible, and he had realized that humans might have something unique to offer the galactic community after all. 2 weeks after the incident with Kralzeth, the Academy buzzed with news of an upcoming challenge. The elite combat instructors had announced a special assessment that would test students in ways beyond traditional sparring matches. Teams would face complex scenarios designed to evaluate tactical thinking under pressure. Marcus found himself surrounded by classmates eager to recruit him for their teams. The quiet human who had once been ignored was now considered a valuable strategic asset. However, he was surprised when Instructor Vex approached him privately after class. "Human Marcus," the reptilian instructor said, his yellow eyes gleaming with interest. "I have a proposition for you." "Sir?" Marcus replied, uncertain what to expect. The assessment teams are typically composed of students from the same year. However, the Academy sometimes creates special mixed groups to test unusual combinations of skills. "I would like you to join a team with some of our advanced students." Marcus felt a flutter of nervousness. Advanced students were typically in their final year at the Academy, warriors who had already proven themselves in multiple combat scenarios. They were the elite among the elite. "I'm not sure I'm qualified for that level of competition," Marcus said honestly. Vex's scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. "After what you demonstrated with Warrior Kralzeth, I believe you are exactly what such a team needs. Different perspectives, human. That is what wins real battles." The next morning, Marcus found himself standing before 3 of the Academy's most accomplished students. There was Commander Zara 9, a cybernetic being whose mechanical enhancements allowed her to process tactical data at superhuman speeds. Beside her stood Bladesinger Thys, a graceful warrior whose people had developed combat into an art form combining deadly precision with aesthetic beauty. The third member was perhaps the most intimidating, War Chief Brutus, a massive humanoid whose species had evolved from apex predators. "So this is the human who thinks outside the box," Commander Zara 9 said, her artificial voice carrying undertones of skepticism. "I have reviewed the footage of your encounter with the Gorvak student. Interesting, but hardly applicable to serious tactical situations." Marcus nodded respectfully. "I understand your concerns, Commander." "Concerns?" Brutus's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Child, you defeated a single opponent in controlled conditions. We face scenarios where entire armies clash. Your little tricks will not matter when real warriors seek your blood." Bladesinger Thys said nothing, but her posture suggested she shared her teammates' doubts. These were students who had led successful missions against pirate fleets and defended colonies from hostile invasions. What could one inexperienced human possibly contribute? Their first assessment scenario was announced the following day: urban warfare simulation. Teams would navigate a complex city environment while completing multiple objectives under time pressure. Enemy forces would adapt to their tactics and environmental hazards would change throughout the mission. Marcus studied the briefing materials carefully while his teammates planned their approach. Commander Zara 9 calculated optimal routes through the city, her cybernetic mind processing thousands of variables. Brutus selected weapons and equipment suited for close-quarters combat. Thys choreographed movement patterns that would allow the team to flow through obstacles with minimal resistance. "Human," Zara 9 addressed Marcus after they had completed their initial planning. "We have assigned you a support role. Stay behind us, observe our tactics, and try not to interfere with our operations." "Understood," Marcus replied, though something about their plan troubled him. It was perfect in execution, flawless in conventional tactical thinking, but it felt somehow incomplete. The simulation began at dawn. The team inserted into the virtual city environment, their objectives displayed on individual tactical displays. They needed to secure 3 key locations, extract valuable intelligence, and eliminate specific high-value targets, all while avoiding civilian casualties and maintaining stealth when possible. Zara 9's calculations proved accurate as they moved through the urban maze. Her route selection avoided most enemy patrols and surveillance systems. Brutus eliminated threats with brutal efficiency when stealth failed. This moved like flowing water, her blade work turning combat into deadly poetry. Marcus followed as instructed, watching everything but contributing little. The team operated like a perfect machine, each member's skills complementing the others perfectly. They secured the first objective, ahead of schedule, and moved toward the second location. Then, something unexpected happened. The enemy forces began adapting faster than Zara 9's calculations had predicted. Her optimal route suddenly crawled with patrols. Brutus found himself facing weapons specifically designed to counter his species' natural armor. This discovered that the environment itself was shifting, with new obstacles appearing to disrupt her flowing movement patterns. "This is outside normal parameters," Zara 9 reported, her synthetic voice tight with frustration. The enemy adaptation rate exceeds theoretical maximums. They're learning from us too quickly, Thais agreed, pausing behind cover as enemy fire peppered their position. Someone must be feeding them tactical intelligence. Brutus growled in anger as an energy blast scorched the wall near his head. If there's a spy in the simulation, we should hunt them down and tear them apart. Marcus listened to his teammates' analysis while studying the changing battlefield around them. Something about the enemy's adaptations seemed familiar, though he couldn't immediately identify why. What if there isn't a spy? He said quietly. What do you mean? Zara 9 demanded. What if the enemy is adapting because they're supposed to? What if that's the real test? The three advanced students paused in their tactical discussions to stare at the human. Brutus's expression suggested he was questioning Marcus's sanity. Explain, Thais said simply. Marcus pointed toward the shifting architectural elements around them. Look at how the environment changes. It's not random. The obstacles appear where they'll force us to alter our approach, but they don't make progress impossible. It's like the simulation wants us to adapt. Simulations are designed to test specific skills, Zara 9 stated. This scenario tests urban warfare capabilities. But what if it's testing something else too? Marcus asked. What if it's testing our ability to think differently when our original plans stop working? Thais tilted her head thoughtfully. You believe the real objective is adaptation itself? I think maybe we're being tested on whether we can abandon perfect plans when perfect plans aren't enough, Marcus replied. As if to emphasize his point, another wave of enemy forces appeared in positions that made their current approach completely impossible. Zara 9's calculations would need hours to develop new optimal routes. Time they didn't have, so what do you suggest, human? Brutus asked, his tone still skeptical but no longer dismissive. Marcus looked around at the impossible tactical situation, then back at his accomplished teammates. For the first time since joining the team, he smiled. I suggest we stop trying to be perfect and start trying to be unpredictable. The transformation in the team's approach was immediate and dramatic. Instead of following Zara 9's optimized routes, they began moving in ways that defied conventional tactical wisdom. Marcus suggested they split up deliberately, something that violated basic military doctrine about maintaining unit cohesion. That's suicide, Brutus protested. Divided forces are vulnerable forces. But they're also unpredictable forces, Marcus countered. The enemy adaptation system is learning from our patterns. If we don't follow patterns, what can it learn? This understood first. We become chaos instead of order. Exactly, Marcus said. But controlled chaos. Each of us takes a different approach to our objectives, but we coordinate the timing. Commander Zara 9's cybernetic mind struggled with the concept. Her programming was designed to optimize efficiency, not embrace randomness. This violates every principle of successful team operations. Maybe that's why it might work, Marcus replied gently. They implemented the plan with remarkable results. Brutus abandoned his preferred heavy assault tactics and instead moved through the city like a ghost, using stealth techniques his massive frame shouldn't have been able to execute. Thais deliberately broke her flowing combat patterns, fighting in choppy, erratic bursts that confused enemy targeting systems. Zara 9 turned off her tactical optimization, protocols, and began making decisions based on intuition rather than calculation. Marcus coordinated their efforts not through complex communication systems, but through simple, almost primitive signals. A reflection off a broken window told Brutus when to move. A pattern of small stones thrown onto a rooftop informed this of enemy positions. Zara 9 received updates through the deliberate disruption of electronic signals rather than direct data transmission. The enemy adaptation system, designed to counter sophisticated military tactics, found itself unable to respond to actions that seemed almost random. When Brutus suddenly charged directly through what appeared to be the most heavily defended position, the enemy AI couldn't calculate his probable objectives because his route made no tactical sense. When Thais began fighting in ways that violated her species' traditional combat aesthetics, the system couldn't predict her next moves. Objective 2 secured, Brutus reported, his voice carrying surprise and growing excitement. The enemy never saw me coming because I never should have been there. Confirmed, Thais added. Target eliminated using techniques that shouldn't work against his armor type. But they did work because he was prepared for proper bladesinger methods. Zara 9's voice carried electronic confusion when she reported. Intelligence package acquired through methods my programming classifies as 93% inefficient. Yet mission parameters were completed ahead of schedule. As they regrouped for the final objective, Marcus could see the change in his teammates' attitudes. The skepticism had been replaced by a combination of respect and curiosity. They were beginning to understand that human tactical thinking operated on completely different principles from their own training. How did you know this would work? Thais asked as they prepared for the last phase of the mission. Marcus considered the question carefully. I didn't know it would work. I just knew that what we were doing wasn't working, so we needed to try something different. But why these specific changes? Zara 9 pressed. Your suggestions seemed random, but they achieved precise results. They weren't random, Marcus explained. They were based on what I observed about each of you during our planning phase. Brutus, you kept looking at the stealth routes even though you were planning heavy assault approaches. Thais, your warm-up movements included techniques that weren't in your formal battle plan. Zara 9, your calculations kept generating alternative options that you dismissed as inefficient. The three advanced students exchanged glances. The human had been reading them more carefully than they had realized. You saw what we wanted to do, not just what we thought we should do, Brutus said slowly. Human psychology, Marcus replied. We often know the right answer before we know why it's right. But we get trained to ignore those instincts in favor of proven methods. The final objective proved to be the most challenging yet. Enemy forces had concentrated in overwhelming numbers around their target location. Traditional approaches would require either a long siege or a direct assault with heavy casualties. Analysis suggests this phase is designed to be impossible, Zara 9 reported after reviewing the tactical situation. Enemy strength exceeds our capabilities by orders of magnitude. Unless impossible is the point, Marcus said thoughtfully. What if the real test is whether we can find a solution that doesn't exist? Explain, Thys demanded. Marcus pointed toward the enemy concentration. Look at how they're positioned. Perfect defensive formation, overlapping fields of fire, multiple backup positions. It's textbook military perfection. Which makes it impossible to assault, Brutus agreed. But what if we don't assault it? Marcus asked. What if we make it irrelevant? For the next several minutes, Marcus outlined a plan that made his earlier suggestions seem conventional. By comparison, instead of attacking the enemy position, they would convince the enemy to abandon it voluntarily. Instead of securing the objective through force, they would make the objective come to them. This plan requires the enemy to act irrationally, Zara 9 pointed out. No, Marcus replied. It requires the enemy to act rationally in response to irrational circumstances. The execution was a masterpiece of psychological warfare mixed with creative problem-solving. They created false intelligence suggesting that their real objective was elsewhere entirely. They staged fake communications indicating that massive reinforcements were approaching from multiple directions. They even convinced the simulation's environmental systems to generate weather patterns that would favor attackers over defenders. Within an hour, the impregnable enemy position began to empty, as forces redeployed to counter threats that didn't exist. The objective, left with minimal protection, fell to a simple infiltration that required no combat at all. Mission completed, Zara 9 announced, her voice carrying a tone that her programmers had probably never intended to include. Total casualties 0. Time elapsed, 47% of projected duration. Methods employed, unclassifiable. As they emerged from the simulation environment, Marcus saw Instructor Vex waiting for them along with several other Academy officials he didn't recognize. Their expressions ranged from impressed to bewildered. Well done, Vex said simply. All of you. That was perhaps the most unconventional successful completion of this scenario in Academy history. One of the unfamiliar officials stepped forward, his uniform indicating high rank in the Galactic Defense Force. Human Marcus, he said formally. I am Admiral Kethvar. We need to talk. Admiral Kethvar led Marcus to a secure conference room, deep within the Academy's administrative levels. The walls were lined with star charts showing the current state of galactic civilization, with various colored indicators marking trade routes, defensive positions, and areas of concern. Marcus noted several red zones near the Outer Rim territories. Sit, please, the Admiral said, his tone formal but not unfriendly. What I'm about to share with you is classified at the highest levels of Galactic Defense Force operations. Marcus took a seat, feeling distinctly out of place in his student uniform among such high-ranking officials. Besides Admiral Kethvar, there were two other figures present: a ethereal being whose species Marcus didn't recognize, and a heavily scarred warrior whose cybernetic implants suggested extensive combat experience. "Human," the Admiral began, "your performance in today's simulation has confirmed something we've suspected for several months. Your species possesses tactical capabilities that are uniquely valuable to the galactic community." "I'm just a student, sir," Marcus replied honestly. "I don't think I've done anything special." The scarred warrior leaned forward, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on Marcus. "3 months ago, you arrived at this academy as an unknown quantity from a primitive world. Since then, you have consistently demonstrated an ability to solve problems that our best tactical minds consider unsolvable. The incident with student Kralzeth was not an isolated event," added the ethereal being, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested telepathic communication abilities. "Our monitoring systems have recorded 14 separate occasions where you identified solutions that escaped notice of advanced students and instructors alike." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I just watch things carefully and try to think about them differently." "Exactly," Admiral Kethvar said, his expression growing serious. "And that difference in thinking may be crucial to our survival." The Admiral activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. Star systems appeared in three-dimensional detail, with various indicators showing fleet positions, resource allocations, and threat assessments. "For the past 2 years, the Galactic Defense Force has been engaged in what we call the Void War," the Admiral explained. "Our enemy is a species that appeared from beyond the galactic rim, with technology and tactics that defy our understanding." Marcus studied the holographic display, noting patterns in the red indicators that marked enemy activity. "They're not fighting like any of the species I've studied." "Precisely," the ethereal being confirmed. "They employ strategies that violate every principle of warfare taught in our military academies. Their tactics appear random, inefficient, even self-destructive, yet they continue to achieve victories against forces that should easily defeat them." The scarred warrior manipulated the display controls, showing recent battle footage. "Watch this engagement. Our forces outnumbered the enemy 3-1. We had superior technology, better positioning, and commanders with centuries of experience." Marcus watched as the battle unfolded. The galactic forces executed textbook maneuvers with perfect coordination. Their enemy's response seemed chaotic and disorganized. Yet somehow, by the end of the engagement, the superior galactic fleet was in full retreat. "I don't understand," Marcus said. "How did they win?" "That's exactly the question we need you to help us answer," Admiral Kethvar replied. "Our best strategic minds have analyzed these battles exhaustively. Every traditional analysis suggests we should be winning decisively. Yet we continue to lose ground." The ethereal being's harmonics shifted to what Marcus interpreted as frustration. "The enemy fights like they don't understand the rules of warfare. But their ignorance somehow becomes an advantage." Marcus continued studying the battle footage, his mind working through the patterns he observed. Something about the enemy tactics seemed familiar, though he couldn't immediately identify why. "May I see more examples?" he asked. For the next hour, the officials showed Marcus engagement after engagement. Each battle followed a similar pattern: galactic forces executing perfect strategies, enemy forces responding with apparent chaos, yet somehow achieving victory through methods that defied analysis. "They remind me of something," Marcus said finally. "What?" all three officials asked simultaneously. Marcus hesitated, uncertain whether his observation would be helpful or insulting. "They remind me of humans." The room fell silent. Admiral Kethvar's expression showed surprise, while the scarred warrior's cybernetic implants clicked with processing activity. "Explain," the ethereal being requested. "Not humans specifically," Marcus clarified, "but the way humans think about problems. You said they fight like they don't understand the rules of warfare. What if they do understand the rules, but they choose not to follow them?" "That would be irrational," the scarred warrior stated. "Would it?" Marcus asked. "Today in the simulation, my team achieved victory by abandoning rational tactics. We succeeded because we did things that shouldn't work according to established military doctrine." Admiral Kethvar leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. You're suggesting that the enemy's apparent chaos is actually a deliberate strategy? I'm suggesting that maybe they think about warfare the way humans think about survival, Marcus replied. When the established methods don't work, you try new methods. When the new methods don't work, you try completely different approaches. The ethereal being's harmonics shifted to what Marcus interpreted as excitement, adaptive thinking rather than optimized thinking. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. Every galactic species I've studied approaches problems by perfecting proven solutions. But humans approach problems by finding new solutions when old ones fail. The scarred warrior's cybernetic eye focused intently on Marcus. If your analysis is correct, then conventional military strategy is useless against this enemy. Not useless, Marcus said carefully. But maybe insufficient. You might need to fight unpredictability with unpredictability. Admiral Kethvar stood and walked to the star chart on the wall, his gaze focusing on the red zones marking enemy territory. Human Marcus, how would you like to help us test your theory? Sir? The Galactic Defense Force is preparing a major operation against enemy positions in the Kepler sector. Our best strategic minds have developed what they consider a flawless battle plan. I would like you to review that plan and suggest alternatives. Marcus felt a wave of anxiety. Admiral, I'm just a student. I don't have any real military experience. Neither did the enemy when they began defeating our most experienced commanders, the Admiral replied. Sometimes fresh perspectives are more valuable than extensive experience. The ethereal being added, your species has survived on a dangerous world through adaptability rather than strength. Perhaps that survival instinct is exactly what we need. Marcus looked around the room at the faces watching him expectantly. These were leaders responsible for the safety of billions of beings across thousands of worlds. The weight of their trust felt overwhelming. I'll try, he said quietly, but I can't promise my ideas will work. Right now, Admiral Kethvar said grimly, our proven ideas aren't working either. We need something different, even if it seems impossible. As Marcus left the conference room with classified battle plans and tactical assessments, he wondered if he was about to make the biggest mistake in galactic history. But he also remembered something his grandfather had once told him about human nature. When the impossible becomes necessary, humans find a way to make it possible. Marcus spent 3 sleepless days studying the classified materials Admiral Kethvar had provided. The Galactic Defense Force's battle plan for the Kepler sector operation was indeed flawless by every conventional standard. Fleet positioning optimized for maximum firepower, supply lines secured against interdiction, communication networks protected by multiple redundancies. If warfare were a mathematical equation, this plan would guarantee victory. But Marcus had learned that his enemies didn't think like mathematicians. He spread the holographic displays across his dormitory room, creating a 3-dimensional map of the planned operation. His roommate, a Zephyrian named Crix, had been temporarily relocated to maintain security, leaving Marcus alone with thousands of tactical details and strategic projections. The more he studied the plan, the more convinced he became that it would fail. Not because it was poorly designed, but because it was too well designed. Every element was predictable, optimized, rational. Against an enemy that thrived on chaos and adaptation, rationality might be a fatal weakness. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry to his room. Marcus quickly secured the classified materials before opening the door to find Instructor Vex waiting outside. Human Marcus, the reptilian instructor said. May I enter? I believe we have much to discuss. Of course, sir, Marcus replied, stepping aside. Vex glanced around the room, noting the obvious signs of intense study. Admiral Kethvar has informed me of your assignment. I wanted to offer my assistance. Thank you, sir. Though I'm not sure how much help anyone can provide, this feels impossible. Impossible problems require impossible solutions, Vex observed. That seems to be your specialty. Marcus managed a weak smile. I'm not sure if that's a compliment or a warning. Perhaps both, Vex replied, settling into a chair with fluid grace. Tell me, what have you concluded about the enemy's capabilities? Marcus reactivated one of the battle analysis displays, showing footage from recent engagements. They're not better fighters than our forces. Individual combat skills, equipment quality, even numerical strength often favor the galactic fleets. But they win anyway. How? They make our strengths irrelevant, Marcus explained. When we optimize for firepower, they avoid direct engagement. When we secure our supply lines, they attack targets we didn't know needed protection. When we predict their movements, they do things that don't make strategic sense. Vex's yellow eyes gleamed with interest. You speak as if you understand their thinking. I think I'm beginning to, Marcus admitted. They fight like humans would fight if humans were facing impossible odds against superior opponents. Elaborate. Marcus pulled up the tactical projection for the Kepler sector operation. Look at this battle plan. It's perfect for defeating an enemy that follows logical military doctrine. But what if the enemy doesn't care about military doctrine? What would they do instead? Whatever we don't expect, Marcus replied. The plan assumes they'll try to defend their positions. But what if they abandon their positions entirely? The plan assumes they'll engage our fleets in direct combat. But what if they ignore our fleets and attack something completely different? Vex studied the holographic display with renewed attention. You believe they will not defend the Kepler sector at all? I think they might let us take it without a fight, Marcus said. Then, while our forces are celebrating victory and consolidating their new positions, the enemy will strike somewhere that really matters. But the Kepler sector contains strategic resources vital to their operations. Does it? Marcus asked. Or does it contain resources that we think are vital to their operations? What if their real strategic goals are completely different from what we assume? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Vex remained silent for several minutes, his reptilian features showing deep concentration. If your analysis is correct, Vex said finally, then our entire intelligence apparatus has fundamentally misunderstood the enemy's objectives. That's what worries me, Marcus admitted. We're planning to attack positions that might not matter, using strategies designed to counter enemies who think like us. But these enemies don't think like us at all. What do you propose? Marcus activated a new display showing his alternative analysis of enemy behavior patterns. Instead of trying to predict what they'll do based on what we would do, I tried to identify what they've actually done in previous engagements. The data revealed patterns that conventional analysis had missed. Enemy forces consistently abandoned positions that seemed strategically important, while fiercely defending locations that appeared to have little tactical value. They avoided battles they could win in favor of engagements that seemed hopeless. They sacrificed immediate advantages for long-term gains that weren't apparent until much later. They're playing a completely different game, Marcus concluded. While we focus on winning individual battles, they're focused on something else entirely. What? I think they're trying to change the rules of warfare itself, Marcus said. Every victory they achieve demonstrates that conventional military wisdom doesn't apply to them. Every defeat they inflict on superior forces proves that traditional advantages can be meaningless. Vex's tail swished with agitation. To what end? Maybe they want to force the galactic community to abandon everything we think we know about conflict resolution, Marcus suggested. If they can make our military doctrines obsolete, they win without having to defeat our actual capabilities. The implications were staggering. If Marcus was correct, the enemy wasn't trying to conquer territory or destroy fleets. They were trying to undermine the psychological foundations of galactic military thinking. How do we fight an enemy whose goal is to make fighting impossible? Vex asked. We don't fight them, Marcus replied. We out-adapt them. Explain. Marcus began outlining a radically different approach to the Kepler sector operation. Instead of executing a perfect battle plan, he suggested implementing multiple imperfect plans simultaneously. Instead of concentrating forces for maximum efficiency, he proposed scattering them in patterns that served no apparent strategic purpose. Instead of securing objectives in logical sequence, he recommended pursuing goals that seemed to contradict each other. This appears to be organized chaos, Vex observed. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. If the enemy expects us to be rational, we become irrational. If they prepare for conventional warfare, we give them unconventional responses. If they want to change the rules of engagement, we change the rules faster than they can adapt. Vex studied the proposal with growing amazement. You are suggesting that the Galactic Defense Force abandon everything we have learned about military strategy. Not abandon, Marcus corrected. Transcend. Use our knowledge as a foundation for creating something completely new. And if this approach fails? Marcus looked directly into Vex's alien eyes. Then we fail attempting something that might work, instead of failing while attempting something that definitely won't. The instructor's scaled features showed what Marcus had learned to recognize as approval. Human Marcus, I believe you have discovered something that goes far beyond military tactics. What do you mean? You have identified the fundamental challenge facing galactic civilization, Vex replied. How do we maintain our values and capabilities while adapting to threats that seek to make those values and capabilities irrelevant? Marcus felt the weight of that observation settle over him like a physical burden. He was no longer just a student trying to pass an assessment or even a consultant helping with a military operation. He was potentially helping to determine whether galactic civilization could evolve quickly enough to survive its own success. Sir, he said quietly, I really hope I'm wrong about all of this. So do I, human, Vex replied. So do I. But if you are right, then your species may have arrived in the galactic community at exactly the moment when we needed you most. The war room aboard the flagship Eternal Vigilance buzzed with tension as Admiral Kethvar reviewed Marcus's proposal one final time. Around the massive tactical display, representatives from 12 different species debated the wisdom of abandoning centuries of proven military doctrine in favor of what many considered organized chaos. This plan violates every principle of successful fleet operations, declared General Thokmaran, a veteran commander whose species had never lost a war in their documented history. We are being asked to trust the strategic insights of a student who has never commanded so much as a shuttlecraft. That student has demonstrated capabilities that our most experienced officers failed to recognize, Admiral Kethvar replied calmly. His analysis of enemy behavior patterns has proven accurate in every simulation we've conducted. Marcus stood quietly near the back of the room, feeling distinctly out of place among the assembled military leadership. His student uniform looked shabby compared to the elaborate dress of galactic officers, and his youth was painfully obvious among beings who had lived for centuries. The human's insights are certainly interesting, conceded Fleet Admiral Zix Talara, her crystalline features reflecting the holographic displays. But implementing his suggestions would require us to abandon tactical coordination between our fleets. How can we maintain effective command and control when our forces are deliberately acting in contradictory patterns? That's exactly the point, Marcus said, speaking for the first time since entering the war room. Every face turned toward him with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. The enemy has consistently defeated our coordinated efforts by anticipating our logical responses. If we become unpredictable to ourselves, we become impossible for them to counter. Unpredictable to ourselves? General Thokmaran's tone carried obvious disdain. Young human, military victory requires discipline and coordination. Chaos is the enemy of both. With respect, sir, Marcus replied. Chaos has been working quite well for our actual enemies. Maybe it's time we learned from their success instead of repeating our failures. The tension in the room increased noticeably. Several officers exchanged glances that suggested they found Marcus's directness inappropriate for someone of his rank and experience. Admiral Kethvar intervened before the situation could escalate. The enemy fleets have taken positions in the outer Kepler system exactly as our intelligence predicted. They appear to be preparing for a conventional defensive engagement. If human Marcus's analysis is correct, this could be a trap designed to exploit our conventional thinking. And if his analysis is wrong, General Thokmaran countered, we will have handed them victory by abandoning the very strategies that built galactic civilization. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like a physical force. Billions of lives across hundreds of worlds depended on decisions being made in this room. If his unconventional approach failed, he would be responsible for one of the greatest military disasters in galactic history. Admiral, he said quietly, permission to make a suggestion? Granted. What if we implement both approaches simultaneously? The room fell silent as officers considered the implications of that proposal. Elaborate, Admiral Kethvar requested. Marcus moved closer to the tactical display, his nervousness gradually giving way to focused concentration. Deploy our main battle fleets according to the original plan. Execute the conventional assault on enemy positions with full coordination and overwhelming force. But simultaneously, deploy smaller independent units using unpredictable tactics against targets that serve no apparent strategic purpose. To what end? Fleet Admiral Zix Talara asked. If I'm wrong about enemy psychology, the conventional assault will succeed and the independent units will be irrelevant, Marcus explained. But if I'm right, the conventional assault will trigger whatever trap the enemy has prepared, while the independent units will be in position to respond to their real strategy. General Thakmaran studied the proposal with obvious reluctance. You are asking us to divide our forces and pursue contradictory objectives simultaneously. I'm asking you to hedge our bets, Marcus replied. Prepare for the battle we expect while also preparing for the battle we don't expect. The debate continued for several more hours, with officers arguing the merits and dangers of Marcus's hybrid approach. Eventually, Admiral Kethvar called for a final decision. We will implement the humans' proposal, he announced. Fleet Admiral Zix Talara will command the conventional assault forces. General Thakmaran will oversee our defensive preparations. Human Marcus will coordinate the independent units, sir, Marcus said, surprised. I don't have any command experience. No, the Admiral agreed, but you understand unconventional thinking better than anyone else in this room. You will have full authority over forces assigned to implement your alternative strategy. 3 days later, the Battle of Kepler began exactly as Marcus had predicted. The enemy allowed the galactic fleets to advance deep into the system, offering minimal resistance to the conventional assault. Fleet Admiral Zix Talara's forces achieved every objective ahead of schedule, capturing enemy positions with remarkably few casualties. The human was wrong, General Thakmaran reported with obvious satisfaction. The enemy is fighting a conventional defensive battle and losing badly. But Marcus watched the tactical displays with growing unease. The enemy's behavior was too perfect, their resistance too minimal. They were giving up positions that should have been defended to the death. Admiral, Marcus said urgently, I recommend immediate withdrawal of our advance forces. Withdraw? General Thakmaran's voice carried disbelief. We are achieving total victory. No, Marcus replied, his voice tight with certainty. We're achieving exactly what they want us to achieve. Before Admiral Kethvar could respond, alerts began flashing across every display in the war room. Enemy fleets were emerging from jump space throughout the galactic core regions, attacking civilian targets and supply centers thousands of light-years from the Kepler system. Impossible, breathed Fleet Admiral Zix Talara. Our intelligence showed all enemy forces concentrated in this system. They showed us what we expected to see, Marcus said grimly. While we've been fighting their decoy fleets in Kepler, their real forces have been infiltrating our home territories. The scope of the enemy's deception became clear over the following hours. The forces defending Kepler were indeed real, but they represented only a fraction of enemy capabilities. The true assault was targeting the industrial centers, communication hubs, and population centers that sustained galactic civilization. Recall all fleets immediately, Admiral Kethvar ordered. We must return to defend our core worlds. Sir, Marcus interrupted, the independent units are already in position. During the conventional assault, Marcus's unconventional forces had been deploying throughout the galaxy in patterns that served no apparent strategic purpose. Some units had been positioned near seemingly unimportant asteroid fields. Others had taken station in empty space between star systems. A few had even been assigned to protect locations that intelligence reports suggested were of no value to the enemy. Now, as enemy fleets emerged to attack galactic civilization's vital centers, they found Marcus's independent units waiting for them. The forces that had seemed randomly scattered suddenly revealed themselves as a perfectly positioned defensive network. How did you know? Admiral Kethvar asked as reports of successful defensive engagements poured in from across the galaxy. I didn't know, Marcus admitted. I just positioned our forces where they would be if the enemy's real plan was the opposite of what it appeared to be. The Battle of Kepler marked a turning point in the Void War. For the first time, galactic forces had successfully anticipated and countered an enemy strategy. More importantly, they had demonstrated that unconventional thinking could be just as effective as conventional military wisdom. Human Marcus, Admiral Kethvar said as they watched enemy forces retreating from positions throughout the galaxy, I believe your species has taught us something crucial about survival in an unpredictable universe. What's that, sir? Sometimes the best way to adapt to change is to become change itself. Marcus looked around the war room at the faces of officers who had learned to see him not as an inexperienced student, but as a representative of humanity's unique contribution to galactic civilization. They had discovered that humans brought something valuable to the community of worlds, the ability to think beyond the boundaries of established wisdom. But Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The enemy would adapt to their new tactics just as they had adapted to conventional strategies. The real test would be whether humanity could continue to evolve faster than their opponents, helping galactic civilization stay one step ahead of any force that sought to destroy it. The quiet student who had once watched from the back of the classroom had become something he never expected, a bridge between humanity's chaotic creativity and the galaxy's organized strength. Together they might just be enough to preserve both. As Admiral Keithvar began planning the next phase of operations, Marcus found himself looking forward to the challenge. After all, adapting to impossible situations was what humans did best.